Hello viewers, this is Neelam ma'am. Welcome to my channel and welcome once again to the world of Shakespeare. Today's module is specially for my students of Standard 8, as I am going to teach you Act 1, Scene 3 from the play Macbeth. But before I begin to teach you the text, I would like you to know a little about the play. Macbeth was published by Shakespeare in 1606. It tells us the tale of Macbeth and his wife's lust for power. This lust for power destroyed them both in body and mind. The play begins with Banquo and Macbeth, who defeated the Norwegian kings in Scotland. In this scene, Banquo and Macbeth are returning from the battle. On their journey, they happen to cross a field where they meet three witches. The witches proclaim Macbeth to be the chieftain of Glamis, Coverter, and the King of Scotland. They also tell Banquo that he would be the father of the future kings. Macbeth riddles them with questions. The witches vanish. Macbeth and Banquo continue with their walk, discussing about their prophecies. Macbeth is currently the chieftain of Glamis, and the first prophecy is already true. But what about the chieftain of Coverter and the King of Scotland? The chieftain of Coverter is still alive, and so is the king. They continue walking and they stumble across two Scottish noblemen. One of the Scottish noblemen, Ross, thanked Macbeth for his service in the war, and the second nobleman, that is Angus, told Macbeth that the King of Scotland, King Duncan, had promoted him to be the chieftain of Coverter. Both these noblemen explained to them that the former chieftain of Coverter was a traitor, and that though he is still alive, the King of Scotland would have him executed tomorrow. Now, this is insane news for Macbeth. Not only is he promoted to the chieftain of Coverter, but he realizes that the witch's prophecies is coming true. Next proclamation is that he is the king. The king is to be the future king. He wonders whether Banquo's prophecies is also going to come true. At this, Banquo says that he sees it disloyal to discuss about the current king being dethroned. He further warns Macbeth that these prophecies might be a trick to tempt them into criminal behavior. And it is here that the scene ends, and today's module will be dealt till here. I would like all of you, before I start the text, to keep your text in front of you as I teach and paraphrase for you. As it is in the Elizabethan language, I would like you to listen to the paraphrase and my explanation. We have the topic in your text as a prophecy comes true. A prophecy comes true. Let me begin the text, and the title of your text is A Prophecy Comes True. Well, prophecy is a prediction of what will happen in the near future, in the near future. You must have come across fortune tellers who try to predict your future. Okay, let us come directly to the text. Please keep your text in front of you. As I paraphrase, I have told you earlier, you already know the characters in this scene. They are Macbeth, Banquo, the two generals, Scottish generals, because Macbeth is a great leader in the battle. And then we have Agnes and Ross, the two Scottish noblemen, and the three witches. And just before this scene, you have a drum sounds, you can hear a drum sounds of the stage. And third witch, she says, a drum, Macbeth comes, just before this scene. And this scene, you have a heath, as I told you, a field or a heath is an open area which is uncultivated. It's an uncultivated land. It gives you a desolate or an impression of bleakness, and thunder and lightning. And there's thunder and lightning. You can imagine something very pleasant, not at all pleasant, when there's thunder and lightning, and then an open area, an open land which is uncultivated, gives the impression of bleakness. Okay, and you find the three witches entering in this heath and make the prophecy, which is too unbelievable for Macbeth and Banquo. These three witches are dancing together, hand in hand in a circle. All three witches, please see your text. All three witches. The weird sisters hand in hand, posters of the sea and land. Now, weird, you know, is suggesting something supernatural, unearthly. So these three witches are dancing together in a circle. We weird sisters hand in hand, swift travelers over the sea and land. Posters of the sea and land, I said. Thus do go about, dance around and around like so. Thrice to thine and thrice to mine, 3 times to yours and 3 times to mine, and thrice again to make up 9, and 3 times to add up to 9. So they are dancing in a circle hand in hand, going round and round 3 times, another 3 times, that is 9 times. They're going round in a circle, dancing together. Peace, the charm is wound up. Enough, the charm is ready. And if you have read stories about witches and fairies, the witches you must have seen, they are boiling soup or a broth, and then they're wounding here, keeping ready a charm. And charm, as you know, it is something to control or achieve as if by magic. The power, the quality of delighting or attracting or fascinating others. And that moment Macbeth and Banquo enter. Macbeth: so foul and fair a day I have not seen. Macbeth says, I have never seen a day that was so good and bad at the same time. Banquo: how far is it called to foes? Banquo says, how far it is supposed to be for foes? He says, how far is it to foes? And then he sees the witches. He sees the witches there. What are these, so withered and so wild in their attire? He sees the witches and says, what are these creatures? They are so withered. Withered means all wrinkled, looking and crazily dressed. They are withered, so withered looking. They are so wrinkled looking and so crazily dressed. Attire is dressed. That look not like inhabitants of earth, and yet are on it. He says they don't look like they belong to this earth, to this planet, but I see them standing here on earth. And then he tells the witches, or are you what? That man may question. He says, are you alive? Can you answer questions? You seem to understand me. By each at once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. Now, choppy again means deeply wrinkled. As I told you, these witches have been described as, so withered looking, so wrinkled, and the choppy fingers, the fingers are, deeply wrinkled. So he says that you seem to understand me because each of you has put a gruesome figure, or you can say extremely unpleasant wrinkled finger to her skinny lips. So you can picture the witches, and you must have seen in the movies and the stories. They are all withered. Are they pleasant looking? Not at all. Okay. So their skinny lips, their choppy finger, and the whole attire is so crazy. And he says, you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. He tells the witches that you look like women, but your beards keep me from believing that you really are. So now you know that they look like women, but they at the same time have beard. Macbeth, speak if you can. What are you? And then Macbeth also says, speak to the witches, speak if you can. What kind of creatures are you? First witch, all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. And first witch, what does she say? All hail Macbeth, hail to you, Thane of Glamis. Hail is to welcome, or to cheer, or to salute, or to greet with enthusiasm or approval. So first witch says, all hail Macbeth. She proclaims Macbeth to be the Thane of Glamis. Second witch, all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Coverdale. Now, the second witch says, all hail Macbeth, hail to you, Thane of Coverdale. Now, Thane is actually being named, the King of Duncan, the King of Scotland, has rewarded, Macbeth by being named as Thane, and Glamis is the area where Macbeth rules, and so they have proclaimed first witch has proclaimed him to be the Thane of Glamis, which he currently is, and then the second witch says she proclaims him to be the Thane of Coverdale. Third witch, all hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter. All hail Macbeth, the future king. Banquo, good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so good? Banquo tells Macbeth, my dear Macbeth, why do you look so startled and afraid of these nice things they are saying? And then he tells to the witches, in the name of truth, are ye fantastical? Or that indeed which outwardly ye show? Fantastical is something, conceived by imaginations. Here he means to say, he tells the witches, tell me honestly, are you illusions, or are you really what you seem to be? My noble partner, you greet with present grace and great prediction of noble having. He tells the witches, you have greeted my noble friend with honors and talk of future so glorious that he seems rapt withal. Rapt is, to be absorbed or totally fascinated by what one sees or hears. So Banquo tells the witches that you have greeted my noble friend with honors and talk of a future so glorious that you have made him speechless. To me you speak not, if you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not. Speak then to me. So he says that, but you do not say anything about me. If you don't say anything to me, if you can see the future and say how things will turn on, he says to the witches, Speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate. He said, you have been speaking about the glorious future of my noble friend, but you do not say anything about me. So he tells that if you can see the future, and say how things will turn on, tell me, I don't want your favor and I'm not afraid of your hatred. First witch says, hail. Second witch says again, hail. The third witch, hail. And the first witch, lesser than Macbeth and greater. The first witch says, you are lesser than Macbeth, but also greater. Second witch, not so happy, yet much happier. You are not as happy as Macbeth, yet much happier. First witch, Banquo and Macbeth all hail. So they say third witch, thou shalt get kings, though thou art none. She tells Banquo that your descendants will be the kings, even though you will not be one. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. Even the first witch again says, Banquo and Macbeth all hail. Banquo and Macbeth all hail. Macbeth, stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. So Macbeth tells the witches, wait, you only told me part of what I wanted to know. By Sinel's death, I know I am Thane of Glamis, but how of Coverdale? I already know I am Thane of Glamis because I inherited this position when my father Sinel died. But how can you call me the Thane of Coverdale? The Thane of Coverdale lives, a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief, no more than to be Coverdale. She says the Thane of Coverdale is alive, and he is a rich and powerful man, and for me to be the king is completely impossible, just as it is impossible for me to be the Thane of Coverdale. Say from whence you owe this strange intelligence. So he asks the witches, tell me where you learned these strange things, or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting. Now blasted is something damaged, and as I told you, the heath is so desolate and this uninhabited and giving the impression of bleakness. So he tells the witches, he demands from them to know that tell me where you learned these strange things and why you stop us at this desolate place with this prophetic greeting. And prophetic greeting, as I told you, accurately predicting what will happen in future. Speak, I charge you. He says, he commands the witches, speak, I command you. And then the witches vanish. Banquo, the earth hath bubbles as the water has, and these are of them. The earth has bubbles just like the water, and these creatures must have come from a bubble. Whither are they vanished? Where did they disappear to? Macbeth, into the air, and what seemed corporeal melted as breath into the wind. So corporeal is actually physical. So Macbeth says, into thin air. When Banquo says, where did they disappear? Macbeth says, into the thin air. Their bodies melted like breath in the wind. Would they had stayed. I wish they had stayed. Macbeth wishes that the witches should have stayed. Banquo, were such things here as we do speak about? Banquo says, were these things we are talking about really here? Or have we eaten on the insane root that takes the reason prisoner? Or have we eaten on the insane root that takes the reason prisoner? He says, are we both on drugs? Were these things we are talking about really here? He means the witches, were they really here? Macbeth, your children shall be kings. He tells Banquo that your children will be kings. Banquo tells, you shall be a king. And Banquo tells Macbeth that you will be the king. Macbeth, and Thane of Coverdale too. Went in not so? And Macbeth says, and Thane of Coverdale too. Not only I'll be the king, but and Thane of Coverdale too. Isn't that what they said? As I told you, they are discussing about the prophecies made by the witches. Narrator, as they mull over what they have heard from the witches, two men enter. Ross and Angus. You know, these two are the Scottish noblemen from the king. They've come to thank and also give him Macbeth the news. So Banquo says, to the self same tune and words, who is here? And Thane, that's exactly what they said. And then as they see the two noblemen, Banquo says, who is this? And Ross and Angus enter. Ross, the king hath happily received Macbeth, the news of thy success. Ross tells Macbeth that the king was happy to hear of your success. And when he reads thy personal venture in the rebels' fight, his wonders and his praises do contend, which should be thine or his. Silence with that. He says that whenever the king, that is, whenever he hears the story of your exploits in the fight against the rebels, he becomes so amazed, it makes him speechless. Silence with that. In viewing over the rest of the self same day, he finds thee in the stout Norwegian ranks, nothing afeard of what thyself didst make, strange images of death. And then he says, he was also shocked, that the king was also shocked to learn that on the same day you fought the rebels, you also fought against the army of Norway, and that you weren't afraid, at least bit of afraid of death, even as you killed everyone around you. Strange images of death. As thick as hail came post with post. And he tells, messenger after messenger delivered news of your bravery to the king. And everyone did bear thy praises in his kingdom's great defense and poured them down before him. He says that messenger after messenger delivered news of your bravery to the king with praises of how you defended his country. Angus, we were sent to give thee from our royal master thanks. So Angus tells Macbeth, the king sent us to give his thanks, only to herald thee into his sight, not pay thee. He says that the king sent us to give you his thanks and to bring you to him. Your real reward won't come from us. It is the king who's going to reward, it's not his. Okay. Ross, and for an earnest of a great honor, he bade me from him call thee Thane of Coverdale. And Ross says, and to give you a taste of what is in store for you, he told me to call you the Thane of Coverdale. He means the king has told to call you the Thane of Coverdale. In which addition, hail, most worthy Thane, for it is thine. Then he says, so hail Thane of Coverdale, that title belongs to you now. Banquo, what? Can the devil speak true? Now he is saying that the king has promoted him to be the Thane of Coverdale. So Banquo comments, he says that, what, can the devil speak truth? So Banquo says, he's shocked. He says, can the devil tell the truth? Macbeth, the Thane of Coverdale lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? So Macbeth says, "The Thane of Coverdale is still alive. Why are you giving me this title?" Now, Angus, who was the Thane, Angus tells, "Who was the Thane lives yet, but under heavy judgment bears that life which he deserves to lose." Now, as I told you, Angus has told Macbeth that Macbeth and Banquo that Angus says that the man who was the Thane of Coverdale is still alive, but he has been sentenced to death as he deserves to die. Okay, so he tells, though the Thane of Coverdale is alive, but he's sentenced to death because he deserves to die. Whether he was combined with those of Norway, or did line the rebel with hidden help and vantage, or that with both he laboured in his country's wreck, I know not. But he says, but treason's capital, confessed and proved, have overthrown him. So he tells that though the man who was the Thane of Coverdale is still alive, but he's been sentenced to death and he deserves to die. Angus says, I don't know whether he fought on Norway's side, or if he secretly aided the rebels, or if he fought with both of our enemies, but his treason, which has been proven and to which he is confessed, means that he is finished. Macbeth, aside, he speaks to himself, Glamis and Thane of Coverdale, the greatest is behind. And then Macbeth speaks to himself and says, it's just like what they said. You know who the witches. Now I am the Thane of Glamis and Thane of Coverdale. And the best part of what they predicted is still to come. The greatest is behind. And then he turns towards the two noblemen, that is Angus and Ross, says, thanks for your pains. He thanks them. He tells them, thank you for the news. And then he tells Banquo. He tells in such a way that only Banquo can hear. Do you not hope your children shall be kings, when those that gave the Thane of Coverdale to me promised no less to them? So he says speaking only to Banquo, only so that he can hear, not the two noblemen. Aren't you beginning to hope your children will be kings? After all, the witches who said I was Thane of Coverdale promised them nothing less. Banquo, that trusted home might yet enkindle you into the crown, besides the Thane of Coverdale. Enkindle is to inspire. Banquo says, if you trust what they say, you might be on your way to becoming king as well as Thane of Coverdale. There is the witches, as means he says, if you believe and trust what the witches have said, you are on your way to be the king as well as the Thane of Coverdale. But it's strange, he says, but this whole thing is strange. And oftentimes to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths. Win us with honest trifles to betrays in deepest consequence. So he tells, the agents of evil often tell us part of the truth in order to lead us to our destruction. That is, and often times to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths. They earn our trust by telling us the truth about little things. Win us with honest trifles to betrays in deepest consequence. So they earn our trust by telling us the truth about little things, but then they betray us when it will damage us the most. And then Banquo tells to Ross and Angus, cousins, a word, I pray you. He says, "Gentlemen, I'd like to have a word with you, please." Narrator: Macbeth cannot believe what he hears and is in deep thought. And Macbeth tells to himself, "Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme." And then, as I told, prologues are actually an event or act that leads to another. So Macbeth speaks to himself. He is saying that so far the witches have told me two things that came true. And he says that, so it seems like this will culminate in my becoming king. So far, two things, what the witches have said, has come true. And so it seems that this will culminate in my becoming king. And then he tells Ross and Angus, "I thank you, gentlemen." He tells, "Thank you, gentlemen. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good if ill. Why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth?" So now soliciting is actually asking somebody for something. So now he says, he thanks Ross and Angus, and he says, "This supernatural temptation doesn't seem like it can be a bad thing, but it can't be good either. If it is a bad thing, why was I promised a promotion that turned out to be true? I am Thane of Coverdale. Now I am Thane of Coverdale." Okay. Just like they had said. "If good, why do I yield to that suggestion, whose horrid image doth unfix my hair, and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature?" He says that, "But if this is a good thing, why do I find myself thinking about, murdering King Duncan, a thought so horrifying that it makes my hair stand on the end and my heart pound inside my chest? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings." He says, "The dangers that actually threaten me here and now frighten me less than the horrible things that I am imagining." What is he imagining? He is imagining that he is murdering King Duncan because he is on his way to be a king, because the present king is. So he says this is much more horrifying and much more fearful than the present dangers which threaten him. "My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, shakes so my single state of mind, that function is..." So he says that even though this imaginings, it is a fantasy, so for the mere thought of committing murder shakes me up so much that I hardly know who I am anymore. That function is smoothed in surmise, and nothing, that function is smoothed in sunrise, and nothing is but what is not. He says, as I told you, my ability to act is stifled, by my thought and speculations. And the only thing that matters to me are the things that don't really exist. Banco. Look how our partner's rapt. I already have told you rapt. He's absorbed and fascinated by what he has heard. So Banco says, "Look at Macbeth. He's in a daze." And Macbeth to himself, he says to himself, Macbeth sighed, "Come what may." "If chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me without my stir." So he says, chance is fate. If fate wants me to be king, perhaps fate will just make it happen, and I won't have to do anything. And Banco, he speaks to Angus and Ross, saying, "New honours come upon him like our strange garments. Cleave not to their mould, but with the aid of use, not cleave is split." So Banquo tells Ross and Angus that Macbeth is not used to his new titles. They are like new clothes. They don't fit until you bring them in over time. Okay. So Macbeth, he speaks to himself, "Come what may, time and the hour runs through the roughest day." So he tells himself, one way or another, what's going to happen is going to happen. Banquo, "Worthy Macbeth, we stay upon your leisure." He tells, "Good Macbeth, we are ready when you are." Macbeth then says, of course, Macbeth tells, "Give me your favor. My dull brain was wrought with things forgotten. Gentlemen, kind gentlemen, your pains are registered where every day I turn the leaf to read them." So Macbeth tells, I beg your pardon, I was distracted, kind gentlemen." He tells he tells Ross and Angus that, "I beg your pardon, I was distracted, kind gentlemen. Give me a favor, my dull brain was wrought with things forgotten, kind gentlemen. Your pains are registered where every day I turn the leaf to read them." So he tells that, "I won't forget the trouble you have taken for me whenever I think of this day." Then he tells, "Let us toward the king." He says that, "Let us go to the king." Then he's speaking so that only Banquo can hear. "Think upon what had chanced, and all more time, the interim having waited, let us speak our free hearts to each other." So he speaks in such a way that only Banquo can hear. "Think about what happened today, and when we have both had time to consider things, let us talk." Banquo says, "Very gladly," means absolutely. Macbeth, "Till then enough, come friends. Until then," he says, "we said enough." And then he tells to Ross and Angus, "Let us go, my friends." Narrator, Macbeth and Banquo reach the palace and meet King Duncan. Then they go and towards the king's palace, and they reach the palace and they meet King Duncan. And this is here where we complete our scene. So if you want to know more about the play, you can read. Till then, children, thank you.